All right. Is it look like it's live?
Yeah, we are live.
Oh, cool. Well, hello everyone. Welcome. We're gonna go ahead and get started today with our fourth and final episode of the Untold Stories for Liberation and Love podcast. Our story did not begin with pain, and this is our episode towards self-determination and our journeys towards self-determination and belonging. And so I'm going to start with just a quick reading, and then we'll introduce ourselves and introduce the podcast for everyone. So this here is it's a radical gratitude spell that is going to be reading from Pleasure Activism by Adrienne Marine Brown. It's a spell to cast upon meeting a stranger, comrade, or friend working for social and or environmental justice and liberation. You are a miracle walking. I greet you with wonder. In a world which seeks to own your joy and your imagination, you have chosen to be free every day as a practice. I can never know the struggles you went through to get here, but I know you have swum upstream, and at times it has been lonely. I want you to know I honor the choices you made in solitude, and I honor the work you have done to belong. I honor your commitment to that which is larger than yourself and your journey, to love the particular container of life that is you. You are enough. Your work is enough. You are needed. Your work is sacred. You are here, and I am grateful. Whew. So thanks. As we're kind of dealing with a whole bunch of things just going on around us, and even just getting us started today, I thought it would be great to just start off with a breath of gratitude as we move forward, and to let that kind of lead us through. So for those of you who don't know, I'm Desiree Simmons. I'm one of the Untold Stories for Liberation and Love founding sisters. And I live in Ypsilanti. I'm a mother to Indigo, who you might see or hear at some point throughout this podcast. And we'll talk a lot about belonging and self-determination. And we also recognize kind of what's going on around us. And so when we started talking about this back in December, we were kind of thinking about entering into 2021 in a different way. And so, but now here we are in 2021, and so just recognizing that has probably shifted a little bit. But I want to give some opportunity for the other folks on the podcast today to be able to introduce yourselves. So, Kristen, do you want to just share a little bit about you and kind of where you are today?
Hi, my name is Kristen De Leon Hamilton. I was fortunate enough to be a part of a few of the Untold Stories workshops, and which happened at a really important time of my life, being invited into those spaces, because now I've really begun to dive really deep into ancestral work, and that was kind of my starting point. And so it's been really meaningful for me. I am a mother of three. I have a 12-year-old and a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. I also live in Ypsilanti. I'm an educator. I am also My father is Mexican American. My mother is British and Hungarian. And so that's kind of I come into this space holding both truths and holding my father, who's the product of assimilation, and my mother, who has had her own struggles with accepting um, something outside of whiteness um, for her children. And yeah, I'm just really happy to be here today. Again, I've been diving really deep into ancestral work, and that's kind of the headspace that I'm in right now, coming into this, and that's been like really grounding for me. And I hope that we can all share in that.
So thanks, Kristen. Good morning, folks. Happy Sunday morning. My name is Gabriela Santiago Rivero. I use she, her pronouns. And I'm calling live from Southwest Detroit. Originally, I was born in Mexico, so I'm an immigrant, naturalized citizen, so I hold many identities. I am a mom to a dogger. I am a dog mom, so don't have any children of my own. But I am an organizer. I'm the policy and research director at We the People Michigan, and where I'm at right now, currently, my headspace is getting back into work. So I don't work for a big corporation. I don't work for Nike or for Ford. I work for my people. So I'm actually very excited to go back into work. I actually love my job, and I am trying to like clean up my office. I'm like trying to my desk has not been touched all for like 3 weeks. So just like really want to recenter myself, reground myself, and I'm excited to have this conversation. To just focus again on what it is that we're striving for, what it is that we're doing for liberation, for belonging, which is what our communities are always fighting for. And yeah, I'm excited to just dive back into the work. I think that I've been working very actively at doing nothing, which I'm very bad at. But I think I did a good job at it this time. I got some rest in. My partner would argue otherwise, but I think that I watched some Netflix. I got some sleep in. I also cleaned the house and it looks great, but I got some rest. So I'm excited to keep doing work and to get back in it and to have this conversation. So thanks, Des. Thanks, Kristen. And yeah, I'll kick it back out to you.
Great. And for those of you who might have been looking for another person, Erica couldn't be with us today. Our thoughts are with you, Erica, and your family as you deal with a health emergency. So just want to send that out into the space too. So I'm Desiree, and I'll just kind of introduce us here. So we've been talking. We are part of a group that started last year, and we released first this anthology, Love and Other Futures, and across a series of 3 workshops that we did. And we started with mothering. So our first one was on mothering. I'm just showing our different poetry books. And then we had a workshop that was focused on migration, rootedness, and belonging. And then we had one that was on survival and vision. And so as through that, that's really a way that I know I kind of came into like practicing and like thinking about poetry as a way of expressing and of healing, exploring, and just also like finding voice in a different way. And so this year we decided to try to share our stories in a different format, which is why we decided to try this kind of podcast. And so just a few things that we want to be true throughout this podcast is intergenerational connections, thinking about storytelling in real time, reaching back to learn from the past lessons, to bring the wisdom forward so that we can better face today as we build tomorrow in the spirit of Sankofa. we want to have a space and ability to feel all of our emotions, especially in times like this, which include not only the pain and the hurt, but also the joy and the truth and the dreams that we have and that we hold. And that is what has led to our survival across time, really. And a way for us to deepen relationships, expand our circle, and to document our stories, because documentation is so important just for us as we remember and as we connect forward and backward. And so this is an offering that we are sharing in that way. And so, yeah, so that if we can maybe think about, so this theme is around self determination, belonging, what that might mean for us. So maybe if we could just start with thinking about, like, what does that mean? What, these words, and what does it look like, feel like, and who gets to decide?
So I also, before we dive into that, I kind of wanted to maybe do another little grounding thing for all of us before we go into it. And a book that I'm spending a lot of time with right now is this one, Voices from the Ancestors. And it's beautiful and has been so healing for me. And there's one part in here that's about honoring the sacred directions. And one part is within that is as the ceremony begins, and it's written by Sarah H. Salazar. And I'm just going to read that for us before we get started. As the ceremony begins, the healer and the wounded warrior women call in the 7 directions for protection and guidance, always beginning in the east and following their hearts to the left. They invoke the energies of the east, where the spark of the rising sun welcomes new beginnings. West, the place of great expanse, the setting sun and letting go. North, where fire collides with ice and our compass surely points. South, the land of our ancestors that is continually warmed by the sun. Above, the home of the sun, moon, and stars, which map our destinies. Below, the resting place of our ancestors and motherland for all. Center, the space of reflection and remembrance of the divine within. If we want to just take a couple of breaths with that, I encourage you to just kind of ground your feet, like connect them with the earth. And that's always really grounding for me. And then put your hand on your heart, one hand on your heart and one hand on your belly. And then feel as the air goes into your body, in through your nose and out. Let's do 2 more. In, out. 1 more. In, out. All right. Open your eyes and rejoin us whenever you're ready. All right.
I just have to say thank you so much for that, actually, because I feel like it was like rolling, and one of the things for this year I want to focus on is slowing down to go fast. And so I really appreciate you in practice, really pulling us to slow and to breathe that in before we just kind of tumble forward. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I've been working on that a lot for myself too, especially with my kids are pretty wild. And so there's a lot of chaos happening all the time. So for me, self-care is taking moments. I don't have a lot of other time. So it's truly just like short moments of time, and it helps. Um, anyway, now my mind is there. What am I diving into, Des? What was the first thing that we were talking about?
Well, this is now making me think about whether we should jump into that image.
That might be a good place to start, actually, because I think that will guide us.
All right, so we're gonna just take a little quick swerve. Let me see here how to get myself back to where I can see everything. So we're gonna put up an image. So as part of had the extreme opportunity to join in a few calls on collective acceleration that were led by Norma Wong, who is someone who I actually was introduced to by Julie Quiros, who's one of our Untold sisters, actually. And so, okay, can I zoom in? So as part of the conversation, so this was something that came out afterwards, and it's this beautiful illustration by I think Claudia Lopez. I'm just trying to think of how to situate this so we can see most of it. And I just want to kind of share a couple of things from this that I feel kind of might speak to some of what we're talking about now, because it talks a lot about what our ancestors asking us, and how do we hear their urgent messages. And so that was one connection, but also talking about time and the need to go deep and to move slow, and also about these shifts, and that the biggest shifts happen in times of turmoil, which I would say that we're in, both as a country here in the United States, but also around the world. There are big shifts and turmoil, and that during these times, things like hierarchical power, greed, anger, extreme divisiveness, fear-based violence, these are things that might be kind of being coming up, and that these are easily triggered in this time, but that, you know, for us, and this connection to thinking about self-determination is us being able to connect with consciousness, and to take that time to think about what we are about, who we are, how are we connecting with each other and our ancestors and our descendants. What are we called to do, and what is needed, and 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 then out of that, how do we find foresight, right? What do we need to pay attention to? And Adrienne Maree Brown also talks about what we pay attention to grows, right? And so, what are we growing? And how are we preparing ourselves so that we can see ourselves through to other side? And what are the skills that we need to be able to do that? And what do we need to be on the lookout for? And there were just a couple of things I know in the conversations that just stood out to me. Norma talked about how leadership will lag, and I'm feeling that right now. I'm feeling a lot of lags in leadership, and but she also talked about that anything that was breaking down before is going to break down faster. And I think of all of the things that we've been putting holes in, like as movements and as groups of people coming into spaces and saying and claiming space within that. Um, that that is part of what's been starting to break down the system. And so thinking about that, and then she talked about, yes, foresight. Um, and Gabby, as you were talking about not being having all this time and trying to be good at like not doing anything. One of the things that she said was, or that I kind of noted was, how do I not do something? When there's all this push, go, 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 how do I not do something so that I might be able to ground back into my vision? And so I know that's something that I personally am just still trying to um, figure out a lot more. But we just wanted to share this image with everyone, and that we might lift from this to start some conversation. I don't know if you do all want me to leave the image up or bring it back down as we start to talk about it.
I'm okay with it being up for a while as we talk about it. And then later on, if you want to just take it down, but for now, I think she looks good.
All right. So I guess I'll dive into it. So I'm so glad that you shared this, Des, because this is incredible, and this speaks to me in so many ways. So I'm thankful to have this here. One of the things that's really speaking to me is actually in this bottom right corner, which is, and we were just talking about this earlier, but so slowing down, which is what we just discussed, but also in that slowness is really taking the time to listen and truly hear what our ancestors are trying to tell us. Because we're always trying to move so fast and do so much and try to make so many changes, and there's so many things that we want to do, and like people we want to help, and like for me, I'm chasing after kids constantly, and I'm like, I need to like create this beautiful world for them and do all of these things, and like I just get so caught up in it that to slow down and actually listen to I spend a lot of time at my altar. I'll stand in front of the altar and like light candles and really try to listen to the ancestors and how the best ways to learn alongside these kids, and remind myself that there is so much to learn from them as well. Like there are little ancestors, right? Like we're going to learn just as much from them as we are from the ancestors who have passed. And so as we reflect on that and feel that, that's when like it's hard, because that's when the growth is usually pretty slow, but we can still acknowledge that it's happening. We're seeding it. We're spending that time and love and energy to build it, to grow it. Yeah, so that's kind of like the biggest thing that I'm looking at. And then especially because that's what I think a lot about with kids and creating this world for them. And then also I see this part too that says weaving in each other's energy and spirit. Like I'm someone, I really feel like I pick up on a lot of energies when I go into spaces, and like my days sometimes are really affected by the energies of the world, but this idea of weaving all of the energies and spirits together, because on the days that may seem really heavy and difficult, like having our spirits and energies intertwined is, I think, weaving is strength. There's beauty in the weaving, there's strength in the weaving. And so if we have all of those energies together, all of those spirits together, we're that much stronger. So I was thinking a lot about that as well. And then let's see, was there something else? Those are the two things that that are just on my heart right now. Is there something else that you all want to speak to?
Thanks, Kristen. And thanks, Des, for bringing this and sharing this. I think for me, as someone who wishes she was more intact with like my creative side, so I got into like movement work through documentation, through photography, through a creative platform. And it was really important for the work. And I don't know, just Kristen, as you're talking, and as I'm reading all of this, I'm starting to feel, so it's a new year, and I think many of us wanted to like walk away from 2020 and expect 2021 to be this great new thing. I think a lot, like a majority of us just knew that wasn't going to be the case anyways, like things would still continue to be hard. And as we're doing this, all I can think of is these things are really hard to do when we're not together. So I actually I'm what I'm thinking now is like, how do we recreate these things in this new space that is COVID, that will probably not be completely changed this year either, just based on how things are slowly being fixed, we're trying to fix this pandemic. All I can think is like, yes, these things are super, super important. And right now, this is missing. I think it's missing for like our larger community, and that's really sad. It actually makes me wonder, what do we have to create this year so that we don't lose this? Because as we talk about belonging, and as we talk about self-preservation, like a lot of that we do through like creative outlets. So like I was engaged in this work because I was in one of the workshops that was held. So for me, this work is super important, and it's really needed. And all I can think is, how are we going to be creating these things in this year, knowing how important it is, knowing that being around art and poetry and people's energies is what feeds us in our work, and how we don't have that. Towards the end of 2020, I essentially just like have not been connected to anything or anyone, just because it all just feels so heavy and intense. And I'm just like overwhelmed and I'm tired. So I really, to your point, Kristen, I miss people's energies, and like I miss people's artwork and poetry, and just like creating this community space. Like as we see this, all I can think is it's so sad that we're not able to be around in a circle together and hearing each other's stories. So for me, this is all really important, and the reality of our work having to continue, but then not looking like we can do this exactly. Like, what are we going to be doing to change it up a little bit? That's going to be really important, because yeah, these are needed tools. And as we're talking about it, it's like the reality of like how we're not doing these things just kind of hit me. And that to me seems like something that we should talk about, or at least like acknowledge that we are not able to do these things now because of COVID, but we need to. And not saying that we had to like think about it right now and like come up with the solutions right now, but just be very aware that I'm sure parents might be creating these spaces. Kristen, you mentioned that you have an altar, but like hoping that many of us are finding ways to connect, um, and to feel, um, to have a space where they can be able to connect with others and feel people's energies and their spirits, even if it's like the people now or their ancestors. Yeah, for me, it's just this just brings that up how we're missing these tools right now in person. How that we can create these tools, and then I'm sure there are some some solutions already, some altars. Um, I should write more in general. Whenever I'm in this space, I'm reminded how even though I don't call myself a poet, I can like put words together and they have meaning. Um, so just like practicing these things because it's obviously so important from this image, and it's something that we're not necessarily able to do how we normally do it, but it's something that we should still do come 2021, even if it looks a lot like 2020. But knowing that we moved on from that, we should be able to navigate these spaces, because we really need to create um, spaces like these for us to do our work.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And it's also making me think about, you're talking about, the time and something that stood out to me too, in the conversation. Norma talked about there's, these awakenings, these eyes wide open moments where all things can be seen differently. And if we ever needed a moment where we all can see everything differently, right? We're in it and have been feeling these vibrations. And I've been feeling like, time. I've been feeling like time is moving at such such different ways. Um, and I've been starting to recognize cycles in time within my own, time on earth. And recognizing how that fits within overall cycles, which is always interesting, like thinking about, um, you know, uh, how other people's histories I'm repeating those without even knowing, right? And one of the things too is just the compression and acceleration that I felt that. I've been feeling that for a while, but during the pandemic, I felt like it really changed the way people were experiencing time. And I think because of each of our like people's different experiences and situations during the pandemic has also highlighted how we experience time so differently, right? Because just because of people's living situations, it's going to change, right? Who you're quarantined with, having a kid, we're like, oh, we haven't, like, some of our friends are like, oh, we've read all the books in our house. We're like, oh, we haven't done that. But I think also within movements, right? How time is kind of coming and compressing and extending, right? That it feels like, oh, we're not making any leeway until all of a sudden now we are. And that we're in a time now just within overall, right now, like I feel like I've just like constantly like my timeline is just tied so much to this climate, our climate crisis time clock right now, and that we are in that time, these 10 years where we're either going to uh, be able to act in ways that you know, human life on this planet can survive, or we won't be able to survive. Like we're making decisions now that will, and uh, and that even though things seem so far away, that we have to make them move faster, right? Um, and Norma said, time is not on our side. We have to move, right? Um, and and that's hard because for me, I'm also like, you know, also I feel like there's all these messages around, care and taking time and going right. And so I've been like having this during this year. I've been really kind of trying to grapple with that of the urgency to move and also the need to rest because I know I'm feeling so exhausted that I can't really even think forward, right? And so now it's blocking. It's almost like doing is blocking my vision. And that is not going to be helpful overall, right? Not for my own personal self, but also not for the community vision that I want to be growing, right? How do I tend to a garden that I don't have time to plant? And so that's something I know I've been really trying to come to think about a lot more, and to think about like, how does that space look? And, I've also been, kind of like, if I put out this much energy for this much time, I know at some point that's going to contract. And um and that in and of itself isn't the problem. It's about, is there anyone else, like, who are the people who will continue it going, right? And like, how do we build that up so that it doesn't have to be? And that's to me is part of that compression and that acceleration, because if we've only count on, a few people to do it all, then yes, things are going to have to take some pauses, because, right? But that if we are able to really think about how we connect in these visions across time and space, that will be what then actually help us take these catapults. It's going to help us jump these gaps that we need to jump, but that it still can be grounded, right? And so that's something that just kind of seeing this and like listening to you all, it's kind of making me think a lot about time and how we experience time, and how um um you know our things our ancestors dealt with not that long ago, just like one or two generations ago, feel like a whole nother world, right? And in you know uh my daughter's generation and after, it'll be a whole new world, right? It's like, what do we recognize, and can we recognize the best of us there?
So that's that's a lot to think about, because you're right. Like, I was talking so much about um, slowing down in a lot of ways, and right now I feel like I've reached this season where I'm doing that, but this is like after a season of a lot of go 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 go, which has been majority of um, of my life, actually, because I was a teen mom, and so you just kind of like, you just keep going. You just have to keep pushing through it. Um, but I'm thinking now, and Gabby, how you were talking about like, where are these spaces, and how do we create these spaces where we can still, like, they're restorative spaces, and yet we're still like doing the work together, rather than, like, I think, bearing all of the weight ourselves, right? Or feeling like we are. And I've been really thankful for the past few months. I've been a part of this group that's led by Dr. Diana Quinn and Oceana Sawyer, and it's honoring the ancestors and healing the generations. And that's been very restorative for me, and it's creating spaces where we are sharing our stories, as well as like just holding each other. And it's very bizarre, right? Because you get, like, on screens now, it can be really difficult to pick up on people's energies, and like, you feel so disconnected. But somehow, like, there are some spaces that I've been in where, like, the container has been created and everyone seems to just really, like, be in it. Like, there's the meditation that kind of helps ground us within it, and then there's, like, different practices that are done throughout. And if we can create more spaces like that, so we all don't feel so isolated right now, and keep those spaces, like, accessible for all of us, I mean, I think that could be everything. And creating those spaces for kids too, right? Like, I have a middle schooler who feels so isolated right now. He can't be around any of his friends, and like that's such a difficult time. Like what is offered for him that has that deep connection, right? So how do we create those spaces for kids as well? Because they're experiencing all of, like they are experiencing all of this with so much heaviness, and like they're building a lot of resilience, but at the same time, like it hurts. Like it really hurts, and it hurts to see your kids struggling in that way, and it hurts to see them so lonely and not have the spaces that they need to just have love and friendship outside of your own little like family, like we have our small little family. So I've been thinking a lot about that too, and how to create those spaces for kids as well. Maybe I'll have to do that, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I know that for me, just with everything that you said, um, yeah, it does seem really difficult to find this like middle of what to do with your time, because there's so much, and at the same time we do have to rest. And I don't have children, did grow up in poverty though, so I do feel like I've also always had been on. And up until this job, I've worked, 5 jobs, went to school full time, my whole life. And that I think got me really good at organizing my time, because when you have to work 5 jobs and you have to go to class, you go back to back to back to back, and you just like wake up and you go to bed, and all you're doing is just going back to back to back, and you're meeting that time. If not, you're like out of a job, or you fail your class. Um, for me, time has always been out of like, and being very aware of my time has always been like out of like necessity and out of survival. And I now realize it's like also like embedded with a lot of trauma, because like I was in bed like with negative like $25 in my account, knowing I have to get up the next day to use my time wisely to make $50 out of, at least like $100 out of like Chili's serving, to like be able to pay that and then put money like gas in my car. So for me, I've always been very good at like using my time wisely because I had to. But being in these spaces, I'm realizing, or trying to, no, realizing that I am a um, I am someone that has been, what is the word for um, people who have been hurt? Um, I can't think of words right now, but I've been a victim of being very just like honestly like super anxious about time, and um, having to like always be on because of what I've had to do, and being in these spaces and learning about how time is a construct, how time is like tied to white supremacy, like there's like all of these new conversations now that are happening. I'm just like, wait, what is going on? Like I've only ever used my time wisely, I think, to survive, and now I'm being told to slow down, which I feel like I can't, because I would like, in my trauma body, like that'll like keep me from making the money that I need to survive. So it's hard dealing with time, and I am struggling with it. But I think what I'm trying to do is just be really intentional, because I'm also really good at being intentional. So if I'm not all that great at like slowing down or not doing anything, I can be intentional about my time. So to your point, Kristen, I also like go through like seasons of like super busy or slow. And at this point, I'm just trying to be very intentional about what those seasons are, and then planning ahead, and then how to rest. So, at one point, I think an article came out this year that humans did hibernate over the winter because there's nothing going on. It's really cold. You just worked all summer, and you just like stayed in the mountain in a cave all like winter, and just like ate and like slept. So like that makes sense now. It's like that makes me feel better about, okay, all winter all I do is eat and watch Netflix, and that's okay because come summer, I'm on all of the time, or come fall, come spring, whenever. Um, that's not exactly my season, right? But like how, like what are your seasons, and how to be very aware of those, and then being intentional about that. So for me and my job, we got 3 weeks off. That's the most time I've ever gotten off out of anything. That's because like we work a lot, we did a lot, and during this time off, yeah, I did intentionally, um, some days not clean, or some days not check my email, or just, or some days just clean, and have that be like my way of like also just like releasing some steam or whatever. So I think for me, it's about being like intentional, and also realizing, um, how my body feels when I do rest, and how important it is that I do rest. So I actually like can't function if I'm always working, if I'm always on. I get like incredibly depressed, or I get really tired, or I get like really like unhealthy with my body. Um, if I'm not resting, like I'm in a bad mood. If I'm in a bad mood, I can't think, I can't necessarily like be creative with solutions. So I also had to, think of rest in a different way, where it wasn't like I was wasting my time. It was more, this is a part of the work that I have to do really good work in the long term. So yeah, and like now where I'm at today, the day before going back to work, is like me in my head, I want to be intentional about having a clean home and like an organized workspace, because once I start to go back to work, like I don't want to be worried about cleaning. I want to be worried about work and resting, like in my bubbles of time that I have to rest. I don't want to be like trying to do all these other things. And we're all different. Some people are very okay with like mess, or like that is like their way of like organized chaos. I am different. So like do what you have to do to like have a space that like works for you. But I'm trying to do that with my time. I'm just trying to be aware of when I need to rest, when I have time to rest, and then like taking that, and being very serious about it, because I will not have it later, and later I will want it, and I will need it. So yeah, just like being like, for like thinking ahead. Yes, it has to do with a little bit of planning, but then also just like being really intentional about like what you want then, and then like what you can do right now for that work.
Yeah, this is also, thinking about, being able to have some control over how your time is spent, and in organizing, how to move from being reactive to being able to be proactive, right? So that we can be deciding how we're using our time and energy, and as opposed to constantly having to react to a situation in front of us, and also recognizing that that's part of the cycle, like that's part of the work of the status quo, is to keep us like constantly focused. I remember having this realization, when I'm learning about leisure time, and I'm in, you know, it's just been interesting to me because of my own life experiences, being in spaces with folks who very different economic situation from myself, and all these different things, and learning about vacations. And I was like, oh, vacations just like when you go visit family. No, that's not how people take vacations all the time. Some people take vacations just to go see a new exotic place, right? Um, and but either way, like there's some sense of like how you use that time. And I've been thinking about also like as a parent, and I've been thinking it's interesting because when uh, a lot of my activism work here really kicked off when I was pregnant. Like hosting this march, in January 2017 in protest of Trump's inauguration. And I was like 8 months pregnant. And then out of that, all the things that came out of it. And it's just been interesting because I've been having these moments where, because it's like people talk about like, oh, well, all the things I should do and all the time I need to spend with my family and all these things. Um, and I've been thinking so much about like, yeah, I get this, like a lot of folks who have children, how easy it is to kind of fade into the background, right? How to like kind of not even, and it feels like the cycle of just like, adulthood, right? And how I'm like, well, I don't know that I don't feel like that's not really my flow at this point. And also, like, yeah, I would like to be able to have dinner with my family every night. um, and anyway, so it's been making me think a lot about like things where I feel like, uh, the what it looks like really to share resources, and that part of it has to be sharing time, because some folks in some places with certain privileges, right, and even like they want to be well-meaning, but they reserve their time for what they need, right? And sometimes that means it changes the way that they engage, and I'm like, yeah, that's great. I applaud that, right? And also, like, everyone wants that, right? It's like that. I feel like that's for so many things with justice. It's like, yes, everyone wants to feel safe. Everyone wants to feel heard. Everyone, right? Like, um, and so it's been making me think about this a lot differently too. And also, I was thinking about like efficiency, and I was like, I don't think that that's a really good metric. Somebody said something, well, that's not really efficient. I was like, well, I just am going to deny that as a metric because, like, to me, efficiency, I'm feeling is so steeped in capitalism and a metric of being able to determine time. And I think that we internalize that, right? Like, we internalize like productivity. I mean, as it is, my husband, like, he's like, what up? Well, if I start the day wrong, I have to be productive. I have to do something that makes me feel productive. And that's the way I know. Like, it's because it feels like if we're not productive, then we're not, and why is that? And I feel, um, so anyway, this is making me think about that too. Like, efficiency and all these things where it's like connections sometimes aren't efficient, building relationships with people, there's sometimes you go forward, you go backward, you go forward, you go backward. You have like an hour long conversation that doesn't go anywhere, right? It's not about that, right? But that is, and so that those aren't the things that are efficient, but that is, you know, that it is only through those connections, it's only through those relationships that I have been able to see these sparks in this movement. It's only when those are aligned that I see that happen. And so, again, like creating those spaces for that, and um, what that looks like to connect these different nodes across place, right? That, it might not be that. So here in Ypsilanti, it's like we can figure out these deep relationships and that grows outward. But it might be there's a node in Ypsilanti, there's these nodes in Detroit, there's these nodes, whatever, right? In California, whatever, doing these same things in deep relationships. And what does it look like when we connect, right? And that's really where there might be power, because um, because we can do some of that at the local level that we can't do kind of, that's how that, so that to me is like kind of also when I think about like, what does it look like to scale some of this? So I'm like, okay, how do I, within Ypsilanti, how do I find this space where we can start sharing time across our resources so we can all be doing, and then we all get to a place where we can thrive more. And then now I'm like, and then I want to connect with other people and other places that are doing that so we can start to think about what is the strategy for how we do that.
So Gabby, I wanted to say too, because I resonated with a lot of what you both said, actually. But I grew up in poverty as well, and like it's been a rough road, and so how that trauma response in our bodies really does affect how we move through the world. And I've had many times where my bank account has been in the negative, and that is not a good feeling, especially like when I have kids, right? And you just have, and there are so many people, especially right now, always, who are feeling that, and there is no slowing down. You have to push and push and push because you have to survive and you have to provide for your kids. And so, I mean, that's something that we need to acknowledge for sure, and especially like what that does to your mental health, and what what you might be struggling with already with mental health. Like I have, I mean, like I deal with depression, I deal with anxiety, like I have bipolar 2 disorder. Like I have a lot of different things happening in my body that I have to, you know, go to therapy. I have to take medications and things on top of being a parent and being an activist and being an educator. And there's so many things that people have to balance. And being a friend, I have to, like, I'm trying to be so intentional about being like a good friend to people, because that seems like something I'm trying to keep myself alive and keep my kids alive. That some of the other things I'm just like, I kind of mess up with friendships sometimes. But yeah, so I was just really thinking about that, because that's something we definitely have to keep into account. But that also with you, Des, like if you're sharing these resources, which is something, you know, we all talk about all the time, that's so like that's so important, and that's everything, and that could help so much. And that's one of the reasons why I'm an educator, is because in my mind being an educator is like, I look at the kids as like they're my kids, like my you know, the kids that I'm working with are my kids, and I'm there to support the families, and I'm there to support the parents. And like we're doing it together. We're sharing, you know, we're sharing time, we're sharing space, we're sharing meals. And so it's like, so that's kind of I mean, that's like what I'm doing right now. At least I'm very thankful that currently I'm in a space where we are secure financially. It's one of those things where, you know, I'm not in a current state of having a negative bank account. So that's suddenly is what makes me feel secure, right? So is it actually secure? But I'm not in the negative. So today I feel good. Um, but I think that's all really important to think about. And then Des, how you're saying how if we're doing the work in all of these different places, and how it's all I mean, I don't know, for some reason I was building curriculum, and I was like talking about the interconnectedness of trees and root systems. And so it was making me think of that, and how like our whole, you know, there's a whole community forest, and so we're all a part of this big forest, and we all have all of these root systems that are connected, and how there are like the elder trees, and there are like the little seedlings, and how everyone plays a part in this. And yeah, even over this big forest of what is like the United States, like we are connected, and we are there to support each other, help each other, send nourishments and like all of the nutrients that each other needs. And yeah, so that's kind of like what I'm thinking to kind of think as a more of a, like, again, like this, like the not losing the connection to like the actual land as well, since that's something that, you know, we're focusing on too. So I kind of was combining the two in my head.
I was I was just thinking about reading a poem. Is this a good time to read a poem, you don't think? So this is from one of our poetry books that we got from our Survival and Vision workshop. And it's called The Iraqi Night. It's by Dunya Mikhail. Okay. So in Iraq, after 1,001 nights, someone will talk to someone else. Markets will open for regular customers. Small feet will tickle the giant feet of the tigri. Gulls will spread their wings and no one will fire at them. Women will walk the streets without looking back in fear. Men will give their real names without putting their lives at risk. Children will go to school and come home again. Chickens in the villages won't peck at human flesh on the grass. Disputes will take place without any explosives. A cloud will pass over cars heading to work as usual. A hand will wave to someone leaving or returning. The sunrise will be the same for those who wake and those who never will. And every moment, something ordinary will happen under the sun. So I kind of picked up that poem in part because I appreciated uh, one, this idea of like, it's just like thinking of the little things, right? It's like the everyday, just, like children will go to school and come home, right? I will be able to just plan a meal and cook it. It's like, um, and and just like this sense of like, um, so anyway, so like I was just like drawn to like that, like as like just like these forward visions that sometimes it's not, sometimes it's just like really that simple. It is just the everyday. It's like what we want to experience, and um, and that uh, it's just the things that bring us comfort, right? Like what is that, and like then being able to name that now, and to be able to then work towards seeing that be true. Um, and so, anyway, something was kind of like pulling that to me through kind of reading this, and then kind of, the conversation just made me feel like, oh, maybe this would be a good time for this poem. So, just wanted to see how that's sitting with you all. Um, so.
So that actually, thanks for sharing, Des. That brings up for me another poem actually, that I'm it's longer, and I could actually share it before we wrap up, but it's very much talks, and it's really about COVID, really about, to the point about what we're talking about, like what to do right now in this moment, and then also like what we're looking forward to. So just like as you read that, yeah, and the ordinary things that we want to go back to is another poem that we have on deck that we can read before we wrap up, that talks a lot about that, like what we're going through right now, and what we could be doing, while we strive to go back to normalcy, which will come one day. We hope, we believe, but yeah, it's something that we're like all yearning for, to be able to create these really really amazing curriculums and spaces for us to be building in. And yeah, we can do it. I think it's the reality of our time. Like it's sad, it's overwhelming, it's a lot, but also we are finding creative ways to be supportive. We are getting stronger, and I think at the end of this, we will look way different. We should look way different, and we should be at a much better place than where we started.
I'm wondering, I'm wondering whether, so one of the things that we've done for each of the sessions, we've had just like little writing interlude, just to take some time, to give some of that time for us to like take a slow down, but just to like jot some thoughts down. And we've done that. And so it's making me wonder, I'm thinking about whether we could take some time now just to kind of jot down some of those things, like what would be some of our stanzas, like if we were doing our poem of, you know, what um what are the just the things that we would notice in our senses that would be true, um you know once we are in a space where we feel that we belong, right? And um that not so much a return to, although it could be a return to, and it could be a return to that's longer than COVID, right? It could be a return to that's taking us back into our histories, and it's taking us back to a place where we're able to recognize how we heal the trauma of our generational trauma, right? So it could be returning back in that way. But maybe if we could just take, maybe just like 3 minutes or so just to have some time to just jot out. And obviously, for everyone watching, to just take some time to think about what would be some of those things that you would want to write into existence today. Maybe just one more minute. Okay. So thank you all for taking some time. You want to just finish your thoughts? Maybe if folks would like to just share a couple of things, doesn't have to be everything. I know it's a very short period of time, so everything's not polished. Um, but yeah, if there's anything that anybody would want to share. I can start with a couple of things. See if I can read my writing. Um, oh, here's a couple of things. So uh, there'll be bountiful gardens where I can just pick what is needed to round out a meal. Children can play outside alone to explore and discover without an adult's gaze. Um, Indigo and I can recreate through trial and error my grandmother's sweet potato pocket. Mm, yeah, those are good. A couple of them. Are there any that you two would like to share?
I can share. So I went through the senses because that's something that's always and like that works for me whenever I'm trying to. I don't consider myself a poet either, but I do like to write and journal, and I'm trying to be better at that. So this is a bit of what I have. When I belong, I will hear my ancestors speak to my spirit with clarity, feel the acceptance and welcoming of a society that wishes to know my name and hear my story, see my children navigate life with joy and play freely, taste the food of my ancestors and not feel like an imposter, smell the copal that surrounds me and know that I am safe.
Thank you both. No, Kristen, I hear you on that feeling like you're a poet. I definitely just like to write and to hang out with poets. So thanks for allowing me to be in this space and trying to create something. Um, so just thoughts that I have. So things that I would need in the future that I would hope that we have is a place to heal, space to share dreams and fears, to have laughter to fill the rooms, would like some food and warm embraces to feed our souls, along with smiles and bright eyes to greet us. And these are things that we will look forward to doing again and again soon. So just trying to recreate those spaces that I know exist, things that I miss, and things that I hope we get to just do over and over again soon. Once we've established what this new phase of our new normal will look like. Um, yeah, because I think this year will be another hard year, but we need to be very intentional about how we're going to create these spaces and be connected to each other to be resilient during this another hard time.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think I don't know, Gabby. I think it is important. I think to name that this is going to be another hard year, right? you know, and but as we saw in that image, it's through these times of turmoil that the biggest shifts can happen. And if we don't need a big shift now, I don't know what we need, right? And it needs to be seismic. you know and it has to be like from the root, because I don't know that our species will last another cycle of half steps, right? And we have what we need. I know we do. I see it all the time. And we're able to connect across cultures in ways that we haven't been able to before, because of information and technology. And I also think because of these returns to these practices of storytelling, and of preserving history in ways that can be really like tactile, but also I think, and I mean, this is probably just like a bubble I'm in, it's, but I just feel like so many of us are like really thinking about these returns and these like, um, and recognizing that our own time signatures are not just the 38 years that I lived on this earth, right? But that it is connected to the past, and that it is connected to the future, and trying to recognize that. And I think, um, you know, I think that that's powerful because that is going to be part of that's going to be what that we have to dig up, right? Um, some of these things in order to really, uh, compost the things that we need to compost, right? So that we can regenerate that energy in ways that are more uh, sustainable and regenerative, um, uh, and nourishing, right? Than what we have. So yeah, I think it's important to kind of name that there is that struggle. And also I've been like really pushing like, struggle is not romantic. Like I feel like we're in a culture where it's like the thing. It's like, oh, and I'm like, oh gosh, it's it's like, okay, like there's one thing about like celebrating all the movement, and then also to be able to name that this should not be like, I don't want to like have to play these like underdog stories with people's lives, like, and so like how to also like break that part of us too, that kind of likes a good story, and get to the place where it's like, we all just want to be thriving, and what does that look like and feel like? And it's these turmoils where we see these things is our opportunity to eyes wide open, and to love so deeply that we will only be able to tell the truth, right? Um, and that might be hard for some folks, but if we're coming from that place of love, we can accept that and know that that is just a call to accountability, right? And so, anyhow, I think, when I think about what I want to put forward and like determining of that's such a big piece of it, is like I just want the future to be steeped in the real stories that we have of what we need, and that is where we move from, and that we're able to decenter the systems and ways of thinking that are harmful, have been harmful, and that actually stop us from being able to move forward, right? That it's not, that we decenter, um, uh, niceness, that we decenter, um, a perspective that says that conflict is bad, right? Because we know that conflict is how we grow. When we do it in ways that are, the way that I'm used to conflict, in my family, I'm just, that, everything can be a conflict. And then we could just laugh and love each other after, right? So anyhow, yeah, that's just, so I guess before we do our closing poem that Gabby has, I want to see if there's other things that we just want to say, before we do that.
I just want to say thank you. Yes, thank you, Des. Thank you, Gabby. Thank you for creating this space, and for, I don't know, I hope that this has spoken to people who are watching, and that people who are watching know that like you can reach out if you need someone to talk to, and if you need someone to connect with, and if you want to continue having conversations like this. I mean, I love having conversations like this. So feel free to reach out so we can start creating those spaces.
Yeah, same. I just have a lot of gratitude. I think Des froze a little there. But very grateful for this space and just for the work that Des does, that Untold Stories is doing, because it's really important to continue to have this work and to create these spaces, like even in this new time. And it's really interesting that the poem that I have talks to a lot of what you were saying last about, like, yes, we are in a pandemic, but like that doesn't mean that we should just look at that as a negative, or just like wallow in our misery. So this poem, I think, encompasses a lot of what we've been talking about, especially as we look forward to what's to come. I'm not sure if folks have heard it already, but Maria Ibarra, who I work with, who's also one of the founders, I believe, about Untold Stories, shared this poem with us last year. And I printed it out, literally. I like put it out like in my office to remind myself that things will get better. So the poem is called Lockdown. Yes, there is fear. Yes, there is isolation. Yes, there is panic buying. Yes, there is sickness. Yes, there is even death. But they say that in the Wuhan, after so many years of noise, you can hear the birds sing again. They say that after just a few weeks of quiet, the sky is no longer thick with fumes, but blue and gray and clear. They say that in the streets of Assisi, people are singing to each other across the empty squares, keeping their windows open so that those who are alone may hear the sounds of family around them. They say that the hotel in the west of Ireland is offering free meals and delivery to the housebound. Today, a young woman I know is busy spreading flyers with her number through the neighborhood so that the elders may have someone to call on. Today, churches, synagogues, mosques, and temples are preparing to welcome and shelter the homeless, the sick, the weary. All over the world, people are slowing down and reflecting. All over the world, people are looking at their neighbors in a new way. All over the world, people are waking up to a new reality, to how big we really are, to how little control we really have, to what really matters, to love. So we pray and we remember that yes, there is fear, but there does not have to be hate. Yes, there is isolation, but there does not have to be loneliness. Yes, there is panic buying, but there does not have to be meanness. Yes, there is sickness, but there does not have to be disease of the soul. Yes, there is even death, but there can always be a rebirth of love. Wake to the choices you make as to how to live now. Today, breathe. Listen, behind the factory noises of your panic, the birds are singing again, the sky is clearing, spring is coming, and we are all encompassed by love. Open the windows of your soul, and though you may not be able to touch across the empty square, sing. So yeah, that to me just seems like a really beautiful poem. Definitely reminded me of um, that we're not alone, that people all over the world are dealing with this, but that people all over the world are coming together in really beautiful ways. And there's images in here that I think many of us can see. Churches coming together, the little girl passing out flyers. I literally did that in my neighborhood, so I cried when I heard that. It's the reminder that even though we're locked down, there's so much work that we could be doing with each other, and that things will look different. They have to look different. Yeah, so hopefully that helped.
No, thank you. That actually is just like, so in closing, I'll just shoot my little t-shirt here because this kind of exemplifies my feeling in this moment as well. This actually is a t-shirt I got actually when I was out supporting some students out in Saline High School as they were dealing with some racist, events there among peers. And so it also reminds me all the time. I remember when I was younger, when I was in high school, people would just say, "Oh, it's okay, the racists will just die off." But what we know is that that is not that is not the case. That's not how change happens. We can't just wait for it to die off. We can't. um, but anyhow, and so anyway, so this little quote, so I'll just say, because it's just like, I think it pulls together, right? This idea of like all these places as you're talking, Gabby, that it is these nodes that are happening, and that it's actually, as we add together all of us, that we do have the numbers. So this is hashtag outnumbered, and then the back, I don't know if you'll be able to read it. I don't know. No, probably not. You know what? No, probably not. I'm like trying to read it myself, but it's like, it's a quote from someone named Drew Campbell, and I think it says, from all of us who believe. I'm like trying to yeah, from all the people who believe in change to all the people who don't, you are outnumbered. And so I think we'll leave it with that we know together we will be able to do what we need to do, and we have the numbers on our side, and all we need now is the connections and the vision to bring it all together. So thank you all for joining us today and for listening to the recording. We will, for those who've been joining us across, this is our last of our episodes, and we'll be doing a re-release on our website with all the episodes and all of the materials and artwork that's being developed alongside the materials, and also the support that we've had to be able to produce all of these. So thank you to everyone involved. Again, now we can go and continue our January day.
Thanks, Des. Thanks, Kristen. See ya. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.